successful transition into teaching in COVID-19, because as we all know, COVID has disrupted a lot of teaching activities. A lot of students are out of school, some are teaching, some are learning using blended learning. Some days they go to school, some schools are even having the morning school and the afternoon school like the olden days now. So we would like him to talk about the governance perspective and the structural adjustments that need to be taken into consideration if we are going to support education at this point in time. Mr. Barosa, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope that I am audible and also visible. I and thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you and your team to share some perspectives and to rub minds on the subject of education, a subject that is dear to me and is certainly dear to all of us. That is why we are here. Um, the, the, the topic is very broad, and I will just try to, within the time that I've been allotted, which I believe is just 10 minutes, to speak to some of the things that I think are most important. We are all aware of some of the challenges with COVID-19, and we've all felt it as parents, as educators, as teachers, and as even people who are policymakers in society. I think that it has taught us plenty of lessons, the most foremost of which is that we've got to, very importantly, build resilience, the ability to cope with challenging and difficult circumstances, particularly challenging and difficult circumstances that nobody planned for. So one of the things that I would like to talk about, very quickly, since you asked me to talk about structural and governance issues, is about the ability of our society, our political class, our policymakers, the people who make decisions for us, as well as on a more micro level for parents, for schools, for educators, especially in a society that is, pretty much predominantly private sector driven education because of the wholesale collapse or problems in public sector or public educational institutions. How can we build our resilience? How can we build our capacity to absorb future challenges and future shocks like COVID-19? I think that the answers are pretty simple. Like the expression goes, it's blowing in the wind. I think that first of all, to be able to build your resilience to cope with these types of things and to survive in a sustainable way, that you must pay attention to, very importantly, capacity. What is the quality of capacity in our educational sector? How broad-minded are people who work in policy making in education, as well as those who are implementing the policies, and to the rest of us who are educators and teachers and school directors and principals and leaders in schools. So very importantly, I always challenge teachers and educators every time I get the opportunity to speak, myself being one, that we must continue to upgrade ourselves. We must continue to upskill, to learn broadly, not just about the narrow pursuit of whatever it is we are teaching in our classrooms, but to expand our capabilities. And I think that one of the big lessons from COVID-19 and the lockdowns and potential lockdowns that may occur in future, and we are not praying for this, is the fact that we need to embrace technology. How much capacity do teachers and educators have in the area of using technology, using it appropriately, developing learning technologies? These are very important things. And for those who were able to cope and survive and deliver sustainable uh, education in their institutions, technology was very important and continues to be very important. You know, I would tell you that about 9 years ago, I set up a technology platform because I'm a tech, I consider myself in a way a techpreneur. And the rate of adoption was so low that we had to shut it down, meaning that people really didn't get the need to learn online and so on and so forth. But here's where we are now. Now we are having meetings on Zoom and people are embracing learning technology a lot more. So it's good. So one very important way to build our resilience, and that's our ability to cope with difficult circumstances, like I've said, is to learn more and to build our capacity. The second very important thing and very important skill that I think that educators and policymakers need to pay attention to is around the concept of risk management. The reality that risks will happen, that things wouldn't always go as you have planned. So in the corporate world where I spend a lot of time, we pay attention to this concept of enterprise risk management, looking at the entirety of everything you do as a school, as an educational institution, from not just delivering your classes, but also to even your school fees, maintaining your buildings, your costs, your operations, that you must look at every end to end, everything you do from the beginning to the end of your operations and assess the level of risk and ask yourself, what could go wrong? So you should always wear what we call a risk manager's hat, asking yourself, what could potentially go wrong? What, what is the severity of these potential events? And very importantly, if they occur, what will our response be? And as a corollary to that, what should we do to even mitigate or prevent some of these eventualities from happening? So it's very important, in addition to building your capacity, which I spoke about earlier, to also build your capacity in the area of risk management. We've all got to be better risk managers to identify what could go wrong and to do our best to put in place structures and policies and procedures to mitigate these risks. I listened to a gentleman from India speak about 3 months ago, and I found it quite interesting. He talked about the fact that there is a business somewhere in the world that most of the employees are between 18 and 21 years old, and the annual turnover of staff is probably about 4 times, meaning that in a year, four staff turnover 4 times. And then he asks everybody, as I ask everybody now, would you like to invest in such a business? Very young people, and then at the end of the day, employee turnover is very high. And everybody says, absolutely not. Doesn't make any sense. But guess what that company is? It's McDonald's. And McDonald's has this huge employee turnover, but you wonder, how is it sustained? Because again, we are talking about sustainability. So how do we sustain McDonald's in spite of the fact that every 3 months, almost all the staff are leaving and a new set of people are coming? So this is my very third and very important point that I want to make. In addition to building your capacity to cope with things like technology and changes in the environment, in addition to having that risk management perspective, I would like to also say that schools, educators, proprietors, and people who are involved in policy and governance around schools must pay deep attention to world-class processes. And that's what McDonald's has, that everything is written down. There is a McDonald's policy for even how to wipe yourself after using the bathroom. So the question is, how well documented are your policies and your procedures? How efficient are your systems at your various institutions? Because it is in that efficiency, it is in that structure, it is in that discipline that you can achieve sustainability regardless of the circumstances, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a civil unrest, whatever it is, that you can always rebuild and reboot yourself because you have paid attention to world-class and disciplined processes. Education is a very important area. And as I have spoken about these three things, building broad-based capacity, managing enterprise risk as an institution, and also ensuring that you've got world-class processes. I would just like to end by talking about three very important things that every educator should have at the back of their minds. And this is COVID or no COVID. I think we have to go back to some of the fundamentals. And very quickly, number one, what is the purpose of education? Why? It is to prepare young minds for independent, meaningful, and successful lives in adulthood. We should always be mindful of this and do everything we can to meet those objectives. Independent, meaningful, and successful lives. The second thing I want to just remind us about is, so what is good education? I want you to recognize that it's beyond maths and English. It's even beyond STEM. It is beyond science and technology and engineering. All of those things are great, but be mindful that to create successful, independent-minded people who will contribute meaningfully to society, there are other skills that they need. They need the skills for life, for creativity, for communication, for leadership, for ethical conduct and professionalism. And unfortunately, we don't focus on some of these life skills that are much more important. We should also be careful about special education because it's important to recognize that everybody is not at the same place. So when we think about the why of education and the what, and I will end now just talking about how to go about it. I think that we need to pay attention to how we design our curriculum, how we enrich our curriculum, how we interpret the curriculum, because many times people say there's something wrong with that, our curriculum is bad. I don't really think so. I think a lot of it is the quality of the people who are involved in education and their ability to interpret the curriculum properly so that they would deliver it in their lesson plans, they would deliver it in their classroom engagement, and they will also assess for it properly rather than assessing for the wrong things. So rather than focusing on cramming and passing, I hope that we will look at Bloom's taxonomy, and we will start to push for some of the higher levels of thinking around evaluating, analyzing, and very importantly, creating. So again, I thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you. And just to summarize, I think it's important that to cope in these times and in more difficult times that will come, whether we like it or not, we must build our capacity. We must focus on things like risk management. We must build very high quality systems and structures in our schools and educational institutions. But overall, we should remember the why of education, the what of education, and deliver education properly as educators, as teachers, as policymakers, and everybody else involved in education. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, good evening.
Hi.
Hello,
I
good
think we may
evening.
have lost our host.
Yes, I
Yes,
think
yes,
so.
we're having network issues. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. That was very, very impactful. We are so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, please, I would like to call on Mrs. Bangwell. I don't know if she can hear me. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you very much, ma.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Good
you very
evening,
Yes,
well.
good
Irene.
evening. Good evening,
Yes.
ma'am.
Good evening.
Mr. Barrow, that was very absolutely brilliant. I'm wondering what I'm going to say again because you've really nailed it, and it's a pleasure just listening to you, sir. Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bangwell. Good to be your miss as always.
All right, sir. So I want to thank the Sustainability Hub. I happen to be here with my husband, so he listened to you, sir, and so he's sending his compliments. He said that was concise, apt, and everything.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, so thank you so much, Sustainability Hub, for inviting me to be a part of today's conversation. Yes, I think that the theme is a bit really wide. So I'm going to try to pick my own corner of perspective and share with us. My name is Irene Bangwell. I'm the co-founder of the North Conrad Naira Day School in Kuje. And we serve children from low-income families. So for 100 Naira a day, they get books, uniform, 1 meal a day. And the girls get sanitary pads every month. So we've designed the school because we realized that children from low-income families cannot access certain kind of quality of education of which they need that in order to break the cycle of poverty. So we're able to serve them quality action learning education, which for me is going to be the anchor of my conversation today.
Okay.
So one of the things I learned early on starting out this journey was the knowing that no nation can rise above the quality of its education. It doesn't matter what natural resources that we think that we have, the people that drive whatever it is a nation has is the human capital, is the quality of the people, the quality of thinking, the quality of values, the quality of conviction that exists. And the one vehicle in which we can redefine the quality of people that live in a nation is through its education. There are several things that COVID-19 has brought to the fore that in some sort of way is a blessing for us. It's a blessing because it's given us the opportunity to actually sit back and ask ourselves, what exactly was the goal of this education? One of the things I've oftentimes talked about is we have a problem with our quality of instruction. Mr. Barra has talked about it. The quality of lesson planning, the quality of engagement in classrooms. Let's take, for instance, COVID-19 hits us and we start nationwide campaigns about hand washing. Meanwhile, hand washing has already been in the curriculum for as long as we can remember. But we've been teaching it for children to memorize, write in exams, and we think that we've impacted them. Whereas knowledge is supposed to shape the values of a person. Oftentimes I say an educated person should make far better choices than an uneducated one. But we've successfully presented education as something that does not require any practice or any application. So COVID-19 woke us up to know that there are several things that would change the way we live in the world, especially in Nigeria, if we changed how our curriculum is being delivered. The second thing that I think that will help us drive sustainability is when we begin to think about everybody as a whole. I liked it when I was called to be a part of this program, that it was all about inclusiveness. And inclusiveness means a lot of things. Inclusiveness begins with, let's say, economic realities. Mr. Barry rightly mentioned about the failure of the public educational institutions. So there's no future if we're not talking about public educational institutions, which cater, by the way, to 83% of Nigerian children, 83% of our human capital. If we don't pay attention to children who cannot afford private education, it means that our workforce will still be crippled. Our workforce will still be underperforming. So one of the things we've done at the NOSC, not one, the core thing we do at the NOSC is to cater for those kinds of children. These children cannot afford blended learning, for instance. So we need to start talking to corporate organizations, especially in the telecoms, to say, yes, the new reality is about blended learning, but what packages exist to support children from low-income families who cannot afford tablets or data? What are you going to do for them? I mean, I've traveled to countries where networks have zones. For instance, in Jordan, universities within Jordan, they call it Unizone. Data is free because for them, they want their university students to look forward to coming to school, there's free data. If they have schoolwork to do, there's free data within school premises. We need to start thinking about things like that. And this is where, for me, corporate partnerships come into play. We need to start asking the people that matter that if we're going online, if education is going to be mostly digitally delivered, how are we going to cater for the children who can't afford it? The third thing I'm going to talk about is, in order for us to get where we want to go, we need to change education content and start making it all about skill building. Ms. Egbisha has already said that. However, I don't want to focus on the life skills part, which is super important, that he was talking about. I want to talk about turning education content to skill building experiences. One thing that COVID has brought to the fore is that it is possible for people to be gainfully employed, working from home and working in global corporate offices, meaning you can be a Nigerian, live in Kuje, but you work for a company in Korea. But on that kind of platform, children and young people need to have skills that they take to work. I happened to teach English for a whole school year, GSS1, last school year, and I discovered that there were so many skill building experiences in even simple GSS1 content. Children could learn editing as part of English language curriculum. Children could learn story writing, blog writing, content development for social media from JSS1 English writing, English language lessons. When we turn it around into skills, then it is easy for children to take what they're learning in school, especially for low-income children like the ones I cater for. It's at the tip of my tongue to give them something they can trade with. So it means that if we start turning around every learning content into some form of skill building experience and move away from cram it and give it to me in exams, and move it into learn how to edit, learn how to create, show children how this content can actually change their lives. What would happen would be that we will have young people in low-income communities who have a skill they can trade with in the global market. So COVID-19 may have been some sort of a disadvantage, but it has also shown us that we're actually more connected than we know. It has shown us quite a number of things. So for me, in summary, our content needs to become a lot more skillified. We have to think about corporate partnerships to support children from low-income families who cannot readily get online like we would like them to. And then we need to make learning content applicable to real life. One of the things that I have also picked from this whole journey is pushing for information literacy in the next generation. During COVID and even Ebola, we watched educated people make really poor decisions. And so I had to ask myself, so where's the value of education? So one of the skills that we need to pass on in making learning as engaging as possible is to push information literacy, where young people get information, but they know how to probe that information, to check for the sources of that information before they run with it. I work in a community, so you're dealing with educated people saying COVID is not real. So it means education for their own children has to be more than that. It means they need to learn how to do research, how to question the sources of their information, and so on and so forth. So for me, all of this put together helps us have quality human beings to build our future. Like I said, the biggest resource any nation has is its human capital. And with this point I have made, I know that when we go in this direction, the general output of our education will be a qualitative workforce and prosperity ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ma. That was a very explosive one. And I would also like to appreciate Mr. Barrow. That was very, very educative and insightful. So for both of you, we are still coming back. I know Mr. Barrow spoke about budget, about building resilience for education and also improving the capacity and quality of educators, especially when it comes to open-mindedness. Educators, are we ready to leave behind the old systems that we were used that were used to teach us? Are we ready to change the face of education into a global one that whereby our learners can be well equipped to tackle current global challenges. So all of that we are going to come back to in the Q&A. Also for Mr. Barry, we are going to be looking at the budgetary allocation because we are looking at systems now. So we are going to be looking at the budgetary allocation for education. Is it enough? Do we have enough funds to actually change our processes and also change our structures so that we can actually have very good structures that are resilient in cases like this? And also, do you think we have the political will to drive this? Because even if we have the money and we have everything, I think there's a component of political readiness in all of this. Do you think we have that political readiness? And you also touched on enterprise risk management and risk recovery rather. We want you to please expatiate a bit more on it. And if you can give us 1 or 2 tips so that educators that are here can go back to their schools with tips on how to implement this, we'll be very glad. Thank you very much for that very, very insightful session. And Mrs. Bangwell, I would like to specially appreciate you. Please, I want everybody to please appreciate her. She has given up a lot to be here. Ordinarily, she shouldn't be here today because she had a kind of emergency that was not too pleasant, but that tells us how committed she is to this course. And also, listening to her speak, I am happy that she chose to come on board. Yes, because she has really shown us that experience is key in education. She has spoken about human capital and having a very good quality of teachers. So I would like to ask her, or I would like her to touch on during the Q&A, how to improve the quality of teachers we have, and also how we can look into the curriculum and make a better use of it. Like she has said, a lot of things are in the curriculum, but somehow they are not being taught to these learners. What strategies can educators put in place? How can we work together so that we make effective use of this curriculum? We'll come back to that in the Q&A. And on that note, we will be bringing on board a very young and vibrant woman, Mrs. Believe Obafaye. She is the Executive Director of Foster Initiative, the work on access to inclusive education and education in rural areas for underserved children. She's going to be speaking to us today about access to education for children in vulnerable areas. We've been talking about the effect of COVID. We've been talking about how COVID has disrupted education. So what about these children that don't have access to digital tools? They're affected in 2 ways. They don't have the money economically, and also they don't even have access to the facilities such as electricity that can even facilitate their learning in these times. So Mrs. Obafaye, you have the floor, ma.
Thank you very much, Modri. Thank you very much, Sustainability Hub. I'm so honored to be here this evening. I want to appreciate my senior colleagues, Mr. Boro and Mrs. Bangwell. Yeah, I was one of female and more sometime 2018, so I met Mrs. Bangwell there. So it's good to hear her speak again. So I'm a female and more. So it's, when I saw your good evening, when I saw your name, I was like, wow. So thank you very much. It's been an enlightening moment. I really appreciate. So talking about inclusive access to education in COVID. Wow. Education is something that is really dear to my heart. I used to tell people, if not that people like us had access to education, we won't be where we are today to be able to talk about education. Now, take for instance, I don't want to bore us with data and all that. Nigeria prior COVID-19 had a very terrible, how do I put it? Our educational situation was terrible. We had about 10.5 million, I think, according to UNICEF, were out of school in Nigeria. Now, here, COVID happened. According to World Bank, about 1.6 billion children were out of school at the peak of COVID. That's April 2020 now. What happens? We all know the importance of education. We all know when these children don't go to school, what happens. Now, looking at the current situation, children are roaming about in school. Some you send them to school, they are not going to school. How do we make education accessible? At FOSIA initiative, where we work on promoting access to equitable and quality education, particularly in rural areas where we have no access to electricity, for example, how do we do it? So in our case, we run a program called the Watchers NG. The Watchers NG started barely before COVID even happened. And we're like, some people were like, did we know COVID was going to happen before we started the program? The program is simply like this. In communities where there are no access to all these basic amenities for providing education, because we knew beforehand that the way Nigeria was going, having the highest number of out-of-school children in the world, meaning 1 out of every 5 out-of-school children in the world live in Nigeria. So we're like, there must be something that has to be done fast. We started creating something like a community learning center. It's not like the normal school, because there are some children, not every child wants to go to school, but it's something like off the normal classroom kind of schooling, where children, particularly we work between the ages of 0 and 12, children who have never been to the classroom before, they come, being in their community, provide them with access to solar and digital devices where they can use online learning, more or less digital learning platforms. So we partner with organizations like Khan Academy, making use of their curriculum for now, and just basic things to get them to be able to know how to identify letters and be able to solve simple basic problems for themselves. So that's what we do. Now, in a case of COVID, when COVID came, some of our children who have been participating in our open education resource platform, it wasn't new. It's just that we had so much on our hand because we needed to scale. The number of children who are now at home were more. So we continued in our effort. In a situation like this, all hands have to be on deck. It's not just going to be the government is not doing this, government is not doing that. I believe there are 3 things we have to do. There must be active citizen participation and engagement to get education really accessible for vulnerable children. There must be active citizen participation. Everybody is important. You cannot say, what will be my impact? I read a quote, it says, if you think your impact is so little, try locking yourself in a room with 1 mosquito. Then you will know how impactful that even the tiniest mosquito is very impactful. So your impact is very, very important. You could speak to somebody, okay, now, what are even the root cause of, okay, COVID without COVID? Before COVID, our children were out of school. What were the causes? We have some basic things, socioeconomical problem, like belief system and all that. So many parents don't even understand the value of education. So it boils down to educating them that, okay, this is this. We need to educate the people about the importance of education. Now, if they now understand, they should be able to send their children to school. Another thing is innovative approach, which is what I've talked about, not just making schooling like the normal 4 walls of schools again, make it something. There needs to be a rapid approach to get, like Mr. Boro said the other time, children should be able to make decisions about their lives, as in with education, the purpose of education. So it's not just like cramming and getting the whole thing. No, let children be able to acquire skills to be able to solve basic problems. That's another thing. So innovative approach. How do we do it? I like what Mrs. Bangwell said. I know about the Knox 100-day school, which is very, very important, because if you look at some of the issues again that make some parents not to send their children to school is because of finances. A lot of parents cannot afford to send their children to school. But with collaborations like this, I know Sustainability Hub does some things. I would like to, maybe this is something you can think about, explore opportunities that, okay, for example, those parents have now been educated, the ones who cannot afford to pay for their children. Now, we can partner with organizations who are into sustainability. These children, okay, you can pick plastics that are littering about. So for every plastic, there's a school doing something like that in Lagos. Every plastic you pick, You could exchange it for school fees and all that. These are some of the ways we can encourage access to education. Like if there is a form of remuneration for wastes that are being picked, do you understand? It will also help to increase access to education. Then the final thing I want to talk about is all hands, just like I said before, must be on deck, and government. We are the government. We have to start from the grassroots. We have to get to talk to our commissioners. We have to get to talk to our councillors. This is what should be done. We should not think about, okay, the normal four walls. Now, the person representing one of the community where we are having our community learning center in Ikere community in Ajokuta, Kogi State, which is totally an off-grid community. We've tried to reach out to him, Mr. Lawal, that, okay, sir, this is the situation on ground. We currently are running an energy access program here. Why not support these children to have just a TV screen where they can learn ABCD? They can learn, when children are interacting with them, it's within the community. We're not saying, okay, they should go to a far place, just separate them. But, boils down to willingness from the government's officials to do it. But I believe when individuals, when they start to take up responsibility and making an example, like a model which we are doing, I believe it will challenge them to come on. So for now, those are my 3 contributions. If there's any other thing, Osho, I'll be glad to.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. For you, they are quick contributions, but they are loaded contributions. Thank you so much. You touched on a lot of innovative ways, especially for us to be able to reach children in underserved communities. And I think that is really key because, like you said, even before COVID, we had a very high quantity of children, or number rather, of children outside school. So for us now, it is not just COVID, it's even beyond COVID because we have a problem. We had a problem before COVID. COVID has only deepened the problem and its effect, and we cannot continue like this. So at this point, I would like to thank you very much, Mrs. Obafaye, and we also think it's going to be very important for us to have experiences and perceptions of educators that are on the field. So it's not just going to be speakers here, it's going to be like a roundtable discussion where everybody gives their own perspectives from what they do, their own first-hand experience. I think it's going to make the discussion richer, and it's also going to let us see what people are actually feeling. So at this point, I'm going to be calling on some participants here that are educators, and I would like them to give us some of their experiences on the field and how it is in their location. So I'm going to start from Ajara to Uthman. Then I'm going to also call on Ayodele Weke. I'm sorry, I hope I got that pronunciation right. I'm going to call on you. And I'm also going to call on Shakirat Kuti. We want to see your experiences. I know Shakirat Kuti is outside the country, so I want us to have comparative experiences. Yes, so please, Ajarat Uthman, please unmute your mic and let us have what you're experiencing in your location and how you are trying to work amidst COVID-19. Hello, Ajarat, are you here with us? Okay, if she's not here with us, then can we have Ayodele unmute our mic and let us know what it is like working amidst COVID-19? Ayodele, are you here with us? Okay, if she's not here, can
you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so firstly, apologies. There's going to be a bit of, I guess, background noise because I'm in transit. Working amidst COVID-19 as an educator or someone in the education space, I feel that it was something we quickly had to adapt to for my organization, for example. But similar to what the last speaker had mentioned, that these problems were there before, and COVID-19 only heightened it. My experience I would describe as
We seem to have lost her.
Yeah, yes, I think we lost her at that point. Okay, so let's see. Is there any other educator in the house? Shakirat Kuti, are you ready now so that you can unmute?
Hi, my name is Shakrat Kuti, and I am an early childhood educator, and I also kind of support children and families who, as well as educators as well. So I thank you so much to all of the Mr. Omabite and Miss what's her name again? I think
Mrs. Bankwell and
yes, I'm Mrs. Believe. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your input on this platform. I personally, I have a huge I'm a huge fan of educators. I value what we do, and I can tell you now, we are not valued enough, and we are not getting what we want. But we are doing all we can to push and to provide to all of the parents and families in our community what we can. As an early child educator, I do work with children who are low-income families, who are in the low-income communities, and it's a challenge. I am in Chicago, US, and it's the challenge of children not having the electric and technology they need. It's not just in Nigeria alone. It is right here in the United States as well. I work with an organization who is able to provide food, they provide housing, they provide jobs, they provide electronic devices for the children and families. They are able to do like a whole lot and this is not just because this is not a standalone community. This is not a standalone organization. This is because there is a lot of collaboration between different CBOs, which is like the community boards. So different organizations, for example, you have the sustainability of Miss Believe also have an organization. So all of these community-based organizations come together to provide these equipment for the children and the families. So a lot of times I do not see such a thing happening in Nigeria. And I have made my research and I realized that we don't tend to see the value that we can bring together to support like a community. And I believe that if we want to sustain a better education for the children and families in our community, there should be a huge collaboration happening. We shouldn't see each other as a debar of progress. So I feel like there should be, one of the things that I push is like collaboration between organizations. I know that the government are providing, the government are doing what they can, even though I think that they are not doing enough. The policies and the policies that are put in place to support education, it's not really to support education. I think that what they are doing is to drive economic growth or the economy, like just to get money from whatever is going on in the community or globally. So I just feel like Ms. Believe said, we all need to come together as private sectors, as community-based organization and start making that push, start advocating, because it is not enough. It's not enough. What we are doing right now is not enough. And I'm grateful that I've been able to meet a lot of other educators and other organizations through, social media. And it's just amazing that the internal, we are working extricately. Like, we are not doing what we are doing for money, because if we are doing it for money, there will be a lot of pushback. So we need, one thing I want to push is to encourage community-based organizations to work together in providing children and families and communities the best that they can in creating a sustainable education globally. Thank you.
Wow, that's
All right.
awesome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing. We really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello. All right. Please, I would like to call on Ayodele. I don't know if she's available. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, so apologies for that. And I think it's also, as much as I don't want to use the word buttress, what my experience was as someone in the education space during COVID period. This is just an example. So during COVID, I work with a university, and the experience I cannot say is completely pleasant. Initially, it started with a lot of issues with data. Our students couldn't get access to data, and these are students that are coming from not only vulnerable community. We have two personas, not only vulnerable families, but even from extremely rich families. So we had a lot of students from Nigeria that had issues with data. Either data was fluctuating and all of that. And it was to be with educators themselves. So when Mr. Barrow mentions that he doesn't see anything wrong with the
Hello, are you still there?
I think we lost her. The network. Okay, she's back.
I'm so sorry.
Okay,
I just
thank
thought I
you.
was muted. Sorry. Please, what was the last thing you heard?
You said your students are not just from vulnerable home, but some from very rich background.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, these are a mixed personality of persona. So you also had students from rich homes as well. But one common challenge we had was when COVID came was data, was connectivity. So when Mrs. Bangwell was talking about collaborations with even maybe telecoms and all of that, honestly, I was just smiling, because I think for us as an institution, or for me as an educator, COVID kind of heightened, these are the issues. So it's not even an issue of it's not an issue of the curriculum, like Mr. Bangwell, Mr. Barrow actually mentioned. Then this The second experience we had was with educators. Our educators, our facilitators and lecturers kind of struggled a lot in delivering or in teaching online. And these are people who are extremely, or better still, I'll use the word, these are people that are very educated. So we knew that there was an issue. And I mean, the conversation today on this call, the conversation today, and all the examples we've gotten, for me, and the fact that I can relate with these examples I've given, it just shows to me, or it communicates to me, that there's a lot that, especially in this part of the world, if we have to get this right. And like Mr. Bangwell said, you can actually tell about a country or a people of the quality of their education. So yes, that was my own experience as someone in the education space in this COVID, because I can't say during COVID-19, since we're still experiencing it anyways. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your experiences. It's very, very good, and we're very happy to hear from people from the field. These are your own experiences, and it will also help us to develop solutions to these critical challenges. I'm glad that we have been able to establish that Nigeria has an education crisis even before COVID. COVID has only deepened the crisis we have, and it's something we need to watch immediately. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your insights. So now we'll go on to some questions, and we hope that we are able to get answers to it so that we can disseminate to more people who are not on this call. So I would like to go back to Mr. Barrow. Like I said, we are coming back to you. Yes, just like what Mrs. Belief said, yes, there's a place for structures and all of that. But especially in the public sector, where we also believe that a lot of good things should come from. Yes, the private sector can do that, but at the same time, they can do that as part of their CSR, but at the same time, they are likely to be more focused on their own economic bottom line, which we cannot blame them for. So how do we get the government to have that political will to be able to drive these changes? For example, Mrs. Belief spoke about going to the local government chairman or somebody in our location, and they've not gotten good response. So here is an initiative that is ready to even do the groundwork, support us with devices. It's becoming an issue. How do we get these people to act?
You know, you have stroked a very important issue. I hope you will recover from my answer. So Mrs. Bangwell knows this very well, that I was also a candidate for the House of Representatives in Abuja in the last election. And I take a very serious view about politics and the concept of political will. So let me explain it very quickly. So everybody blames the lack of political will on all the problems in Nigeria. And I agree. The question is, do we know what political will is and where it comes from and how to actually muster political will? And interestingly, it's part of what I think is part of the life skills education we need. So I've developed curriculum now in 3 areas called politeracy, civication, and values reorientation. Because I believe that until people are properly educated around these 3 things, we're not going to make any progress. So let me explain very quickly where we'll get the political will from. Political will is a combination of the demand for politics and the supply of politics. The demand of politics in Nigeria is so low, and this is shown by the number of people that go out to vote. So we have a very low level of voter participation. It's almost at about 7 or 8% of the actual people who are eligible to vote. And even when we vote in such a low quantum, the quality of the voting is also suspect, driven by ethnicity, religion, money, sharing, and all sorts of stupid things. Now, on the supply side, there's also a problem. And this is, for those of us who are students of economics, you understand the concept of demand and supply. The supply side is the politicians and the political parties that are owned by godfathers, that are run by money bags and cultists. Now, my dear friend, how is this combination of demand and supply ever going to create good governance? So the problem is this. Let me just answer the question clearly. you cannot have good governance. You can't have good education. All these bright ideas that we have, community-based organizations working in partnership with government, it's never going to happen in Nigeria. The reason, or let me not say it won't happen, it will only happen when we have the right type of people in politics and in governance. And that's a fundamental problem we have. So we can sit and intellectualize and jaw and come up with the best ideas, but without a government that understands what you are saying. For example, you want, Mrs. Bangwell, you want telcos to give you what they call it, data-free zones. But what's the incentive for the telcos? If the government doesn't understand that telcos are private businesses that are driven by incentive and cannot create a way through creativity and innovation to say, let's incentivize telcos and give them some tax reliefs and other things that will help them to continue to make their profits while serving the community, then it's not going to happen. So we throw all these great ideas at the feet of people in government and in politics, but here's the problem. They are mostly square pegs in round holes. And that's where the problem is. So I think that to answer your question about political will and the budget and so on and so forth, Nigerians really have to rise up, not just to save education and to help vulnerable people. We need to rise up to a bigger call, the call to get involved more actively in politics and governance. Because in the words of Kwame Nkrumah, former Prime Minister and President of Ghana, he says, you must seek first the kingdom of politics, and then every other thing will be added to you. Our politics is a mess, so our education will be a mess, our health will be a mess, and everything else will be a mess until we clean up the politics. So educators and teachers, start opening up your minds to embrace these new areas of learning, of politeracy, of civication and values orientation, so that we can all get involved and save our country, first politically and then everything else. So that's my thought on political will, budget, and so on.
Wow, that's a lot. And I know it's not unachievable, but like you said, we have to go back to our value orientation, what drives our politics. Because like I watched in a TED talk, a lady said, why shouldn't we be involved in politics? Because if we are not involved in politics, that means that even the food we eat, the hospitals we go to, even the clothes we wear, the brands we allow into our country will be determined by other people apart from ourselves. So if we are not involved in politics, that means that a lot of things will be outside our control. So there should also be the place of politics in developing the educational sector. Thank you very much, sir. But like we also said, we would like to come back to the issue of risk management in educational institutions. How can educators, school owners, how can they work on their policies and processes to ensure that, because this is COVID we are seeing now, we don't know what will happen tomorrow. We can only hope and pray that positive things keep happening, but you never can tell. Disasters don't usually tell before they strike. So how can we design systems, yes, that would always be ready to mitigate these risks?
Well, it's a lot of things that I can try to unpack in 1 minute, but I think it starts from saying, let's first of all understand our processes. Have we laid out all our processes? Do we have process maps and process diagrams? Do we understand the concept of process engineering? So we've got to build capacity in understanding how processes work. And then we should be able to do what we call a risk self-assessment. You know, this is something that everybody who works in any institution, your teachers, your non-teaching staff, your principals, your heads of learning, everybody can participate in this by just answering this question: what could go wrong? So if you take your entire process, you lay it out on a piece of paper, and you look at every step of the process and you say, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? What could go wrong? By the time you ask that question, you would identify a number of different risks, all the things that could go wrong. Then you now ask yourself, what can we do to mitigate this? What's the worst case scenario? And what things can we put in place to reduce the possibility of disaster arising from this type of risk? You know, so it's a big area of corporate development that we call risk management. You know, I can't give it to you in 1 minute, but I can certainly hope that from what I've said, we can all go and do some of our research. And like, I can't remember who said information, we should go and learn Mrs. Bangwell about how to synthesize information so that you don't just hear anything that Mr. Barrow says and take it hook, line, and sinker. You can synthesize it, you can evaluate it yourself, you can question some of the things, and you can learn more And thankfully, we all have the internet, you know. So risk management is very important, but I hope that from what I've described, you know, it's something that is very possible for ordinary people to do. In fact, it's for ordinary people at the end of the day. It's not for techies or anybody special.
Thank you very much, sir. So one key thing that you have given us, and it's very good and effective, is for us to be asking at every step of our processes, what could go wrong? So we have to start looking at the risks that could happen from any of our processes. And I'm sure that will go a long way in helping us to be resilient against any shocks. Thank you very much, sir. So now I'm going to quickly move to Mrs. Irene. I hope you're still with us, ma'am. Yes, you mentioned when you were speaking, you mentioned development of human capital, which is very key. And because the quality of people and the quality of education learners receive cannot be more than the quality that they have in their teachers. So we really have to develop educators. How can we develop educators? Are there professional development courses? If there are, which I'm sure there are anyway, how accessible are they? How accessible are they? Are they free for teachers? Do teachers even have the time after going through school, lesson, and their private lives? How can teachers juggle this so that they ensure that they are always, because the world is changing every second. So how can teachers ensure that they are current, up to date, part-time?
All right, I thank you for that question you just asked. I actually think that part of our problem is the teacher development institutions. I'm saying that they are the problem because of number one, my personal experiences going through one of them, and secondly, the quality of teachers that come to my table from those institutions. If you recall, in my initial conversation, I talked about the need for learning to be as practical as possible and how we need to steadily move away from cramming and regurgitating information, and using models like Bloom's taxonomy that Mr. Barrow rightly mentioned, where we are pushing for children to think, create, analyze, make comparisons, and share opinions, right? So what we have in contemporary classrooms is, I give it to you and I give it to you definitions. Read it and give it back to me. Unfortunately, the teachers were taught like that. So you would find teachers who have a fine result, who speak great English when they can, but when it's time to pass on, so like a math teacher who is exceptional, had his fantastic grades, but has major problems passing it on to his student. So you find that in order for us to get the kind of teachers that will push children to think, we need to explore unconventional ways for finding teachers. We have a problem with the category of people that come willingly to teach on an everyday basis. That most likely young people who haven't gotten employment, who didn't want to teach, and so on. So by the time we're telling them, be up to date, challenge yourself, they don't find it rewarding. Then we also have the people that are really naive and kind of mediocre, and they refuse to be challenged to do more. So in order for us to get a new set of teachers, I dare say that we need to change what we're looking for when we want to recruit. For instance, the North Culinary Day School, we're working out a new program we want to do. We want to start bringing in young people. It's not an age thing, but it's fun, already willing to go online kind of people. Many of the teachers, I mean, I was interviewing a teacher last October, 2 times, one teacher for math, one teacher for English. And part of our employment test is online. So we set up the system and said, please go online. And 2 of them said, oh, please, can you give it in print? I'm not computer conversant. I'm not technology fluent. And I'm like, this is the 21st century. They probably have a first class from the university, but they are not tech friendly. So I'm looking at, first and foremost, looking for people who are already hungry to explore, to learn. I'm also looking at how teacher training, the onboarding processes needs to make a bit of a tweak. One of the things I've ever thought about is taking teachers to a cinema to go and unwind so that teachers can start thinking of themselves from a broader point of view rather than a narrow point of view. I'm thinking about teaching retreats being let's go to the stadium, let's go to the pool. A teacher who is not enlightened in their mind cannot teach enlightened perspectives to children. So for me, we may need to flip the head of how we recruit. Because right now we're even having teachers who go on trainings and then they come back, everything they were trained for, they know it academically. They can tell you what the definitions were. They can tell you how the facilitator went. But when it's now, take it and apply it in your agric science lesson, it becomes a problem. Or they focus on too much of one end and leave the other. So for me, the problem is not that there are no teaching institutions. I don't want to call one government institution, but I don't have regards for that government institution's teaching program. Unfortunately, that's the certificate I have. So I don't have any regards for the teachers that go through that government program. They cheat during the exams. Teachers are hiding answer notes in their glasses cases, in their hijabs. Teachers can't communicate. They can't articulate themselves, but they're going to end that degree. They might have 2 or 3 carryovers here and there, but they'll come and tell, oh, I have PhD. And then they go and write TRCN exams, which, by the way, TRCN exams is not intellectually stimulating. So TRCN is, again, another mediocre examination that teachers have to go through. It doesn't test the teacher for contemporary skills that they need in the classroom. Why on earth do I need to know who was the founding executive director of TRCN in a world that they're asking how to create something here and there? So, so the teaching institutions themselves are a problem. Our recruitment strategies are a problem. Our onboarding strategies need to also change. Again, when you finish designing everything, you ask yourself, what could go wrong with young people? That's Mr. Barrow's risk management perspective. Thank you.
You have touched on a lot of important points here. We have talked of revamping the certification and training that teachers get. And that's the truth. When teachers go through mediocre institutions, then what quality of teachers do we expect? If we have a low quality of teachers, then we cannot expect to have a high quality learning. And that translates onto the future of Nigeria. That means there's a state of emergency, yes, in our educational sector. And I hope that with people like you, we can all put all hands on deck and work together. One last question, Ma, before we leave. You also spoke about innovations and how we can talk to people and teach children outside the school, outside the 4 walls of the school, especially using digital tools. But I'm quite curious, like, how can we reach people? Are there ways that we can have innovations of teaching students outside the school walls without using digital devices? Because the truth is, these digital issues are there. We have the issues of socioeconomic access to these digital tools initially. Then there are other places where they don't have infrastructure to even support the use of these devices. Some places are not even on the national grid when it comes to electricity. So let's say you even give these children access to tabs, and there's an NGO that comes on board and gives them these tabs. How do they power it? Not all parents, when we go to the really vulnerable part of the population, how many parents can afford generators? Do you get? So how can we, is it possible for us to develop ways of still reaching this underserved people with the resources that we currently have, without having to go through digital devices that may not be effective for now in those communities?
Absolutely. Oh my God, I'm so grateful that you brought this up. All right. So first and foremost, technology is not education. It's an enabler. And technology is one angle of enabling learning. I can bet you that schools that are using technology and learning is not taking place. Yes. So it's not technology. Technology is a means to an end. So let me tell you about the North Contrary Day. We don't have a WhatsApp group in the school. I'm not sure we have up to 4 parents that use smartphones. So we can't even talk about them going home with devices. Maybe we would use devices in school, but what about when there's a lockdown? So I'm going to give you a classic case study of what we did during the lockdown. So during the lockdown, everybody is going online, or most people who can are going online, but we know we can't even afford WhatsApp. So we decided to do something called action learning workbooks. Interestingly, when I talked about our work in the beginning, I used the word action learning. And for me, it's a core principle in the way with which we teach today, whether you have technology or not. How can you make learning such an experiential thing for the child that they take the learning further on their own? So what we did with the action learning workbooks is that we turned lessons into storytelling. Math was storified, English was storified. So let me give you an example. We're trying to teach them area one time, and we used their parlors. We said, okay, in your parlor today, let's say your father wanted to buy a new carpet and he needed a measurement, and the carpet people say, tell us how many meters so that we can calculate how many yards. For the child in front of me, there's a language they understand. There is a context that they understand. There is no education if I don't start where they are. I don't need technology to start there. So for those of us that are in communities where we can bring in all the technology equipment for starters, there is still a way for learning to happen at a realm that is okay until we integrate technology. So for instance, they're at home during the time we're using action learning workbooks. We can use that and achieve a great amount of learning. Then when they come into classroom, we can know what we're using within the school. For instance, a school donated tablets to us, 10 tablets. With the new COVID reality, our class size is 10 to 11 kids. That means if we had something we wanted them to watch online, it's one class at a time. You get the idea? So it means that it cannot be our primary, cannot be our primary way of passing instructions, which is why I thought that the question you asked me before we went on, other people came up was, you wanted practical ways to make the curriculum come alive. So we're using storytelling. Let me tell you another thing that has really helped me and helped me in my teacher training. I actually threw away the curriculum. And let me explain what I mean. All I need from the curriculum is the topic. So I get a topic like, oh, you're teaching main ideas and supporting ideas. I refuse to go through the route of what the ministry, what do they call them now? FCTA, I don't know, I've forgotten the regulation. Let's say Education Resource Center, the Education Authority. They say, for after that, teach this, after that, teach that, after that, teach that. My blueprint of making learning engaging is to ask this child in front of me, what do they already know about this subject? Or what about this topic? What should they have known already? If they don't know Jack, I can't start with main idea. I have to start someplace else. And then sometimes I have to look at the lesson content and say, what will understanding this particular lesson mean for this child in this reality? So that I'm not bound by those long notes, those long this. In fact, I got to know that English language properly taught should not have bulky notes, should have more of practice stuff. I mean, the other day I was looking at it and I said, you know what? We need to do a mix and match activity for this student so that for this kid, so that we know whether they understand which part of the sentence is a main idea, which part is a supporting idea. And mix and match is worksheet, paper worksheet. The other time I was teaching comprehension, I saw that children's comprehension levels were below their grade levels. So I said, all right, we're going to create meanings and inferences worksheet. You write a sentence, you tell the child to repeat that sentence in their worksheet and repeat what they think it means and repeat another thing they think it doesn't mean. Those are paperwork, worksheets. They're writing, if you can't print worksheet, they can write it in notebooks and learning is still engaging for them. The problem is, we don't usually start where the child is. You're in a rural community, children's reading levels is different. You can't go 100% what the curriculum is saying you should be teaching this child right now. The curriculum does not know the child that is in front of you, does not know what their education journey has been. You don't need technology to stagger down, to step it down, to reach where the child is, and to move the learning to where it will be relevant to the child. So for instance, Mr. Barrow talked about, he talked about higher order thinking. So I'm giving children short articles that have so many moving parts, and I'm telling them, tell me what the topic is. And I have them argue in class what the subject is. Which one is the main idea? I'm not there to I tell them the principle of main ideas, and I allow them debate and argue in the class about, I think this is the main idea because it does this and does this and does this and does this. If you ask me, learning is taking place. If the lesson requires a technology support, maybe I want to show a video later on, I make sure they've even mastered the principle, because most times online learning content are far ahead of my learners. They're so much far ahead of them. So I need to start them somewhere, and then before we engage. So I want teachers to always have it in mind that technology is not a substitute for quality education. It's a vehicle, it's a tool, it's an enabler. It's not the end, it's the means to an end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. This is another full session on its own. Thank you very much. Like Shakira Tukuti is saying in the chat, you have made very valid points. And the truth is that we cannot go beyond our learners. We need to understand where our learners are, and that the curriculum is just a guide. It is left for teachers to become creative and innovative about the learning process. So we have run out of time, but it has been worth the while, and I hope it has been worth everybody's time on this call. So quickly, before we leave, we would like to also get to Mrs. Obafaye and ask her, because she has told us that citizen activation and parent interest in education is also key for their students to learn. So how do we, as educational organizations, how do we help those parents who do not even see the value of education? How do we help them to see the value of education so that they can support the education of their children, which will also ease the work of organizations like yours? Mr. Bafaya, are you still on the call? Okay, if she's no longer on the call, then can we have somebody answer the question for us? And I'm going to be calling on somebody who joined us quite late. I know he's a very busy person. Mr. Oyewole is a very, very big capacity builder in the space of youth and education. So I'm going to be asking him, if he's active on the call now, I'm going to be asking him how he thinks we can help parents who do not see the value of education. How can we help them see the value of education so that they can support their children's education?
Okay, so I wasn't ready for this, but apparently Mujidat is somebody really amazing and special to me. So I think I worked with some teenagers back then when I was still at Ilorin, and some of the few things that I've understood is that I think it's both ways. It's not just about the parents, but it's also about the children, right? Trying to figure out what the children's passions and what they aspire to become. Things are changing lately. In those days, they didn't give us an option of what to study or what we should become. I'm happy that you're having these conversations, but then learning was even hard for me until I met a teacher that, started taking time, as the previous speaker spoke about, and taking time to teach me maths and making me understand that it's not so hard and it's not so bad. So I think pretty much what I'll just say is it's both ways. The parents have their parts to play. We have to educate them. We have to tell them about opportunities that exist even in different career paths, so that eventually when they are trying to motivate their kids or teach their kids kind of understand where the parents are coming from a place of love rather than a place of force or command, right? Then we're also explaining to the parent that, the kids will be safe in this career, and eventually when they grow up or when they learn this, it's okay for you to sponsor their chosen path, but eventually when they grow up, they'll also be able to, fend for all their bills and take care of their bills. I think many parents, their concern is, can these kids really pay for their bills in the future? So usually parents like to select careers. I think that's my little bit. I'm not a professional. I'm not good at this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us and helping us to answer the question. So from what you said, the key is in letting parents understand the value of education, especially the economic value, because we're in a country where a lot of things are driven by economics. Yes, because of the high rate of poverty. So we need to let people understand the economic value of this education. Thank you so much for being on the call. And I would like to thank everyone again for joining us. I would like to thank all our speakers and panelists, as well as people who have shared their experiences on the field with us. I would also like to thank other people on the call who have not shared their experiences. Thank you so much for giving us a part of your weekend, which would be for resting, you know. Thank you so much. And we are going to be sharing the video of this call, the recording, with other participants who are not on the call. Thank you so much. We have gained a lot from this. And I hope that when we come knocking on your doors again, you are going to answer us because we know you are very passionate about this cause. On this note, we would like to end this edition of the Nexus 1.0. And I would like to say bye-bye to everyone on the call. So we'll see you some other time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mom.
Bye. Bye
Bye.
bye. So long, farewell.
Thank you.
Auf Wiedersehen,
Bye-bye.
goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.